Hey everybody, this is Tana from Proverbial Homemaker, and today I am going to give you a much awaited video review of Tapestry of Grace. We started this this past year, and we've gone through a whole year of using it, and I know that a lot of you have been following along as I've talked about that on social media and asking how it went. So here we are to finally do this review. Sorry it took so long. I'm here in my bedroom at night because this is when I can do videos. I can no longer find pockets of time during the day. That's what happens when nap time becomes a thing of the past. So once I finally figured that out, I got myself set up here. My husband helped me get things set up in the bedroom so I can at least talk to you guys uninterrupted for the most part and help you guys get a peek into Tapestry of Grace, and hopefully it will be helpful to you as you're deciding on curriculum for the coming year. All right, so I have a lot to cover, but first let me chat with you a little bit about why we decided to try Tapestry of Grace this year. So my oldest was going into 6th grade, and we had some choices to make about curriculum because he was getting to be a little too advanced for some of the materials we were using, and I could come up with extension activities, or he could go off and do his own thing with history, or we could look for something that did multi-level teaching and allowed us all to stay together. And after talking with my husband a while about that, we decided that history and all the things that comes with history when you're studying it was important enough of a subject for us to do it together as a family as much as we possibly can. We've dabbled in a few things in the past where we've had my oldest doing, or actually my oldest too, doing a separate history. And we just really feel like that is a wonderful opportunity for families, especially to talk through the big ideas of history and government and philosophy and all of those kinds of things that come with studying history. And we didn't want to miss out on it. And plus we wanted to learn along with them. So we decided to look for something that did multi-level teaching. And really there aren't a whole lot of curricula that are designed, or history curricula that are designed for multi-level teaching and covers, preschool through high school. So Tapestry of Grace is one of them. And after talking with some friends, I decided we were going to give it a go. I was a little nervous because, as you all know, I'm one of those type B homeschool moms who doesn't really like planning and likes to be pretty relaxed about things, and Tapestry of Grace, at first blush, is none of those things. It's pretty involved and teacher intensive, but I brought to it my own solutions to make it as easy as possible and as flexible as possible. And found that it really was designed to be a flexible curriculum. So we had a good time with it this last year. And I'm just going to share with you guys a little bit about what it is and how it works, how we used it, how I adapted it to our needs, and just a peek inside a little bit of the actual lesson plans. All right, so to give you an idea of what Tapestry of Grace is, it is a 4-year history cycle. And it is a classical style in that it has the work or the assignments divided up into levels, but based on age. So you have lower grammar and upper grammar and dialectic and rhetoric. And so most of my kids are preschool through 6th grade this past year. So most of them fall in the lower grammar and upper grammar stages. So those are pretty easy, I think, to put together in Tapestry of Grace. It gets more challenging and more in-depth and more intense when you get into dialectic and rhetoric. So what we did was we did the first half of the year with just lower and upper grammar work. And then in the second half of the year, I started introducing my older child and myself to the dialectic level work. And that worked pretty well. It kind of eased us into using the curriculum and then also into the more intense dialectic discussions and readings and things like that. So it's classical in that way. It is a unit study in that it's all following the historical timeline, and it doesn't just do history. You can cover history, geography, literature, church history, and then for upper grades like rhetoric, you can do government and philosophy. So that's like high school level right there. The philosophy in particular is pretty advanced. So we were mostly focusing on history geography and literature, and then we would incorporate the church history as well, even though we had a separate Bible curriculum that touched on that too. But even then, even if you were just doing the lower grades, you can still pick and choose. You could just do the history or just do the history and the literature. And I think a lot of people do the history and the literature and then throw in some geography every once in a while. And we kind of lived in that space for the most part. And that worked really well for us. So like I said, it's multi-level teaching. It's definitely a buffet style curriculum. It's hefty. There are a lot of words. There's a lot of words in this curriculum, a lot of charts, a lot of pages. And at first, it was pretty overwhelming for me to kind of sift through it. But what I did was I started, and I'll tell you guys a little bit more in a bit about how I did my planning. But what I did was I spent some time just kind of, marinating in the curriculum, trying to figure out what was what, and picked out the things that were most important for me for planning, or the things that I wanted to do. So I picked the minimum things that I wanted to do, and I just started doing the minimum things. And then over time, I was able to add different pieces, reading different sections, just kind of grew into it instead of letting it overwhelm me or trying to do all of it, because you cannot do all of it. Trust me, you don't want to try to do all of it. There's so many pages, so many activity ideas, so many reading selections to choose from. If you try to do it all or even most of it, you'll get burned out real quick. So I recommend, if you're going to give this a try, start with the minimum and work up from there. And I'll explain to you guys how I did that. But the buffet style, I really like that style of curriculum in general because it gives me lots of options that I didn't have to go find and pull together, that I can pick and choose from. And I might do more or less depending on the week or the season or the year or where, my mood or whatever, or my child's needs or their interests. So I like that kind of buffet style. But the downside and the caution is just make sure you don't try to do everything at the buffet because you'll get sick. The main curriculum, the way Tapestry of Grace works, is you go choose which year you want. It's divided into 4 years. We picked the first year, which is Creation of the Fall of Rome. And so when you buy that, you get it as a digital curriculum. And that, I know some people prefer to have a print curriculum. I thought I was going to prefer print, but I actually ended up liking this way a lot because, like I said, there's a lot there and they organize it really well digitally. So you can just drill down with their tabs and everything right to what you need. You don't have to sift through all these pages and find out where you are and constantly be turning things or lug around huge notebooks. You can just find exactly what you need. And that's how I did it. Now, each year is divided into 4 units or 4 quarters, and each unit has several weeks of curriculum. And I printed off 1 week's worth of curriculum. You can kind of see it was 50 pages single-sided, 25 pages double-sided, just to give you an idea. I'm going to flip the camera around in a little bit and show you what is involved in a week of the whole buffet, and then I'll tell you what I chose out of the buffet. But it's very thorough. It is a very thorough curriculum, and I appreciated that. The other thing I wanted to mention about Tapestry of Grace is it's definitely Christian. It has a very solid Christian worldview. I really appreciated in the teacher text that they provided that they designed it so that the teacher would read it ahead of time. So you as the parent would read it ahead of time, which just never happened for me, but it was a nice idea. I ended up reading it as I was doing the planning or as I was teaching the kids, and that worked fine too. But I appreciated how, it would give you the facts and the timeline and the information, and then the authors of the curriculum would come in and insert little pieces that really helped tie everything together and give it a biblical, godly perspective. That was really valuable to me. I appreciated that a lot. We also really liked the literature selections. Not all of them ended up being a good choice for us. And so I'll show you in a little bit, but at the back of each week, they give you a chart that says glance ahead. And it gives you some information about the book selections, especially if there's anything in the books that you might want to be careful about with sensitive children or that might be more mature for the level or whatever. So that was helpful to me. That I didn't figure that out until a little bit later. So there were a couple books that we read and were like, oh. So that was good. Once we figured that out, it helped me to pick literature selections that work for us because I have some sensitive kids. The idea is each week you get to, they tell you this is what you're going to be studying, and then you get to pick a spine, which is, the more general, sort of like a textbook style. This is the overview information you're going to read to your child. And then you can pick literature selection to read aloud to your kids, and they give you options for that. And then literature selections and spines also, if you want, for them to read on their own. And there's several other pieces that you can add to it after that, but that is the gist of how we use the curriculum. We used it a lot of read alouds, a project or two every week. Some of them are big, and lasted a couple weeks. Some of them are really small. So that's basically the main curriculum. So I'm going to flip the camera around now, and I'm going to show you what is involved in 1 week of Tapestry of Grace. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a peek into what each week looks like. So this is for week 26. When you open it up, it'll tell you where the teacher's notes are in the guide, so you can read through the background information. It tells you for each area, for each subject and each level, what the basic themes are that you're going to be learning in history, what you're going to be doing in writing. It shows what the threads for literature are, just kind of a summary about what you guys will be learning. Same thing over here. It gives you objectives, teaching objectives for each of the electives. So you have geography, fine arts, Bible survey and church history, government, philosophy. And it's just giving you a basic, you could just skim through these things and get an idea of what you're going to be learning that week. Then right away you get into the reading selections. So this is page 4 and page 5. This is what I ended up printing double-sided and 2 pages per side for my initial planning efforts, and that worked really well for quite a while. And so what you get is, it'll tell you for history, here are the book selections you can pick. Across the bottom, this is the levels. So you have lower grammar, upper grammar, dialectic, rhetoric. So you can pick, I would go through here with a highlighter and choose the subjects that you want to do, choose which read alouds that you want to do. They give you suggestions for that. You would highlight which things that you want to do as independent reading. They have, for rhetoric, they have a lot more. They have the government electives and all of those kind of things. We kind of tended to stay in these 2 columns, and then we added some here later. It'll tell you what activities you guys might be doing. Like I said, the literature selections. Worldview usually was Bible or church history, so they would give you assignments there. This particular week doesn't have much. Some weeks, especially in year 1, there was a lot of that. And the literature selections will even say your Bible counts as literature this week. And over here, this is just alternatives. So if you're going through here and you're having trouble finding these books, or you just don't like the looks of them or whatever, they give you a whole nother set of alternatives to pick from. So I liked having all those options. Then here they give you an idea of what activities you can do. So here's student threads. It gives you an idea of who they're going to be learning about. These are lists of people they can learn about. Vocabulary and timeline that you can do together. Usually they recommend dialectic or rhetoric to start a timeline. We didn't really do a timeline this year. Here's where you can pick from all the activities. They have group activity ideas. They have individual activity ideas by level. These pages are the writing assignments. So if you're going to be using writing aids, which is optional and an add-on, then these writing assignments coincide with this year's history text and lets you choose based on the level of your child for writing what assignments they're going to do. We did use that for one of my girls, and I really did enjoy it. Then you get into the student activities. Student activities goes more in depth for each level about what activities you're going to be doing on this topic. So like here, this is lower grammar, and it tells you these are some fine arts activities that you can do. Here's a geography activity, Bible survey, and church activity. These are literature charts for each level, they'll have these literature sort of worksheets. They're kind of like worksheets or notebooking pages that you can use for the literature selections that they recommended. We never really used these. We do notebooking and narration in our family. So all my kids will read something, or they'll listen to the read aloud and then we'll narrate back. It's very Charlotte Mason style. And I'm pretty comfortable with that for gauging their understanding.
Even my older kids didn't really do this. If I want to, get something written from them, I just have them do a written narration on a notebooking page, a generic notebooking page. But you can certainly use these if you'd like. I know lots of families do like them. So it goes through student activities for each of the levels. Here's dialectic level. Here's the rhetoric level. Rhetoric level is has a lot more detail, covers a lot more subject. It's very thorough and rigorous. You don't need to add anything else for these subjects for high school, from what I'm hearing from other families who are using it and are doing high school. This is Pageant of Philosophy. This is another thing that you can do for your high schoolers and is very advanced. So we didn't really touch it. We're not even close to that age. And then over here is where the teacher's notes start. So here's that world book text that I talked about. They'll put panels with extra bits of information in here. And then you'll see these white pieces of text are side notes from the authors about how things connect, especially with biblical perspective. So there's a lot of information, but it covers all the different things, like different people and places and events and the different parts of the culture. So like I said, I didn't really read this. The idea is you read it ahead of time, and so you kind of get a grasp of the information to teach your kids. I tended to skim it or to do pieces of it as read-alouds. And then here you start to get to the discussions. So discussions start in dialectic, and the idea is at the end of the week, you would take the information you learned and have in-depth discussions with your children on the history and the literature. So there's a lot of information. This is all the upper grade. And you could spend anywhere from, when I was using this with my dialectic student, this is up into the rhetoric now. So you can see there's a lot that you could talk about. These are all questions and different teaching points. My dialectic student and I, we would spend maybe 20 minutes at the end of the week, just kind of skimming through those and picking the things that looked interesting and chatting about them. A lot of times he came with his own things to talk about. And honestly, a lot of the things that they covered, we had already talked about, but the discussion questions really did help to pull out different ideas and things we hadn't thought about before. And then this at the end is the glance into next week, right here, glance into next week. So this is helpful because, especially if you're kind of doing more on the fly planning like I was, it gives you, you can kind of skim what's coming ahead, make sure you have the books you need. It will have in here, so here's like dialectic. So it'll have in here, so right here, it talks about violent descriptions of death in this book. So if you don't want your kids to read that, or you think they might be troubled by that, you just wouldn't pick that book. You'd pick a different book. So those kind of things are helpful, depending on, what your kids' needs are or what you want them to read. So I do recommend skimming through this, even if you're planning at the beginning of the quarter, or if you're a big planner at the beginning of the year and you're trying to figure out what literature selections to pick, go ahead and flip through those last pages and make note of anything you don't want to get.
So that was a lot of information, and that's okay. Like I said repeatedly, I did not do everything, and you shouldn't try to do everything either. So that is what a week looks like in Tapestry of Grace. There are also other pieces that you can pull in that Tapestry of Grace makes available separately, but that go along with the history study. So they have writing aids, which I already mentioned. And let me show you. You can buy the physical writing aids books, okay? And this comes with a CD, and it comes with, I got this one used. And it basically goes through alphabetically through the different topics. But inside the weeks of curriculum, which I already showed you this, what they provide is a chart that says, okay, if you're doing level 3 for your child, then this is their assignment. And in the digital version of the curriculum, if you buy the digital writing aids add-on, you can access all of this stuff digitally. So you don't need this. You don't need both. You could get either the digital or the print version of writing aids. And writing aids is completely optional. If you are looking for a writing curriculum that is, again, pretty flexible, that you can plug in to go along with your exact weekly assignments in Tapestry of Grace, then it's a great option. I think it's a really good curriculum. We did struggle a little bit with being consistent with it, but when we did, I really liked the way it worked. They had the kids organizing, thoughts into different charts like Venn diagrams and mind maps and things like that to help them organize their information. And I always think that's a valuable way to help kids organize their ideas for pre-writing exercises. And then, of course, they had them do things like poetry and, write plays and things like that. So I like it, but there is a learning curve. And I would probably not try to use it unless you were using Tapestry of Grace. But that said, you don't have to use it. You can use another writing curriculum, ignore writing aids and just use another writing curriculum of your choice. That's totally fine too. But they have that available. And the other thing they have is map aids. And map aids is something that I liked to have. I bought the digital version of that. I like to have it because it would tell you in the weekly assignments, go print this map and have your kids label it or just identify the pieces or color them in or whatever. And that really helped my kids, even though we have a big map on the wall of the world and we have a biblical times map with different, time periods, and we have one that matches the time period we're studying. Those are helpful too for discussions, but it also helps for them to have the page in front of them and be drawing and labeling. So we didn't do it all the time, so I would get the digital version just so you could print it as needed and not have to worry about extra things. The other thing you can buy is evaluations. Evaluations are basically tests and ways to test your child's understanding of the material. I didn't use those at all. I generally don't use those kind of things in our homeschool, so I didn't use them. Pop quiz is something they have. Now, I love pop quiz. We used it all the time. And there's two, I didn't realize this until later too, until I was talking to a friend of mine who uses Tapestry of Grace, but there's two different versions of pop quiz. One of them is a digital download that is printables, and they're more like questions for comprehension or something. I didn't even go look them up. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the digital downloads that are audio files. And those are basically somebody, a man, I can't remember his name right now, the guy who helped write the curriculum, I love listening to him because, like I said, just like in the World Book pieces and the teacher materials that you read, that they have for you to read ahead and kind of get an idea of what you're going to be teaching your kids, this is similar to that, but it's boiled down and condensed. And the idea of it, the reason why it's called Pop Quiz, is it was designed for the dads to be able to take with them, to listen to on the way to or home, to or from work, or when they get home or whatever, to listen to get an idea of what their kids will be learning. And to connect all the big themes and the big ideas and point out some interesting facts and biblical truths and all these kinds of things. And we didn't, of course, my husband occasionally was home when we would listen to them, and he really enjoyed them and appreciated them and learned things along with us. But we didn't end up using it for him. We ended up using it for us. And so at the beginning of each week, when we were ready to launch into that week's learning, we would, during breakfast, listen to the pop quiz for the week, where we would listen to him giving an overview. He gives an overview overall of the entire unit at the beginning of the unit, and then an overview of each week. And so we would listen to the overview of the week, and then he gives a little bit more, a shorter audio for each level. So we would listen to the overview for the week and the overview for lower grammar, and dialectic. And it took maybe overall like 15 minutes. So it's not long. But I think I got the most out of it, me and my older two kids. But the other kids enjoyed listening to it too. He said interesting things and really helped to give us an overview before we launched into it. It wouldn't even be a bad thing to listen to at the end either. So that's how we used Pop Quiz. I would definitely recommend trying those out. A lot of families have done, listening to in the car when they're going to different activities and everything as reinforcement as well. They offer a separate government piece that you can pull in. Our kids aren't quite old enough for that, so I didn't really look at that one. They also have lap books, and the lap books you can buy digitally or pre-printed. So years ago I tried lap books and I absolutely hated them because I had to do most of the work. It was all this cutting and keeping the pieces and not losing the pieces and not losing my mind, and it didn't work out very well. But now my kids are a little older, so I was like, okay, maybe they can cut out the pieces and put them together and they will enjoy the lap books. For the most part, it worked. They were able to do the work. They just didn't really enjoy it. But I know a lot of families really enjoy it, and it helps to have a visual. And at the end, of the unit, you end up with a lap book that has little pieces, little pages that you unfold, little flaps and everything that kind of summarize the whole unit that you did. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. But if you like lap books, if your kids like, hands-on crafty type things or lap books, it's worth trying. It's worth giving a shot. Let's see. You can also buy, so they have student pages, student activity pages that you can buy separate. I showed you in that 1 week's worth, there were a couple of those student activity pages, like with the pages for the literature writing and everything, and you can buy those separate and pre-printed if you want. I, again, just like to print what I need because I don't know if I'm going to end up using everything. And then starting this coming year, so right now, if you go buy Tapestry of Grace Year 1, your option is to buy the whole thing, the whole family, all levels, in digital format, and then you can add all those pieces I just mentioned. Starting next year, they're going to allow for anybody, even if you don't have the digital version, to buy what they're calling spools. And so the spools are, instead of having to buy the whole shebang, you can just go buy like only the geography or only the history for all levels. So that option is coming if that's something you're interested in. Personally, I love having the whole thing. That was part of what I enjoyed. I like having all the pieces at my fingertips and being able to use them if I want and not have to worry about, later on down the road I want to add geography and I don't have it. All right, so let me give you an idea of how I did planning for Tapestry of Grace. So each Tapestry of Grace, when you go buy a year, you get what is called the loom. And the loom is basically, it's like a big file that has all these little files in it that give you helps for the teacher. So one of the helps is a planning page that you can use. They have articles that give you tips on how to plan, and you can find some videos on their website that give you tips for planning. Most of that was too much for me. Like, it was too much information. It was too involved. So I didn't really use most of it, but I did use a couple of pieces. So the way I started out was I just showed you the whole week's worth of printables. What I started out doing is I would go into that week and I would pick out only the reading assignments pages. Okay, so that would be these 2 pages. This one is the primary resources one that I showed you. This is the one that has the history in depth, literature, arts and activities, and worldview. And then I printed this on the other side, or sometimes I would do 2 pages. My printer allows you to print 2 pages per side. And so I would do that and do double-sided. So it was a little small, but it made it so that it was, on 1 or 2 pages I could get everything that I needed. And then on the back, it has the activity ideas and everything. And then once we added the writing, then I would have that writing page. So you can choose which pages you want to print. You don't have to print everything. I would print just those for the week coming up, and I would highlight the reading assignments that we wanted to do, the read alouds we wanted to do, the independent reading we wanted to do, the activity we wanted to do, the geography piece we wanted to do, and then whatever the writing assignment would be for my daughter. And that was it. I would just highlight it, and then I would jot a few notes down about things I wanted to make sure we remember to do, like listen to the pop quiz for the week. And that was it. That was my planning page. And that worked really well for me. So I would try to do that a week or 2 ahead of time at the least. I tried for a while of doing a quarter at a time, but I didn't get very far because I'm not really a planner. But you could do it far ahead. I actually prefer to do it somewhere in between there, because any farther along than that, by the time I get to it, I feel like I don't know what's really happening, and I tend to redo the whole thing anyway. So I would plan about a week or 2 ahead of time, figure out what I needed, check out what I needed from the library or buy the books that I needed, and that worked really well for me. Now, as we started adding other pieces and adding things like the writing and the dialectic discussions and things like that, I felt I needed a little bit more organization. This is what I've been doing now. This is one of the pages that is on the loom. So, I mentioned that if you buy the digital, you'll see this section called the Loom, and in there, with where all the teacher helps are, there's this page, and you could get a page like this anywhere. It just happened to be there, so I printed it out. I cross things out. It has Monday through Friday, and we do a Tuesday through Saturday. So I cross things out. But basically, what I did was I did that same work that I just described, but instead I wrote it in here. And we never followed the days exactly. I don't really care about that. I just wanted things. I wanted to be able to say, okay, is this about a week's worth of work that I've chosen, and have I done too much? And you can tell pretty quickly if I've done too much, and then I cross things out. So I would just write, here's what we're going to read together. Here's what my daughter is going to read independently. Here's what my son's going to read independently. Here's generally what we're going to do. So I have like pop quiz. Here's our read aloud time for the spines. Here's, read the literature. Here's Sammy's writing day, etc. This particular week, we did a Purim reading, and we did a little celebration, where we made some treats and stuff and watched a video on YouTube I found. And that works just as well. I didn't need it to be super detailed or fancy, and I would just go through and check off things as needed or adjust things as needed, and it gave me a quick visual overview. That worked really well. When it comes to the literature selections, all I recommend is one thing I did, even with all my cautions to not overdo it. I totally overdid it at the beginning and added way too many spine options. It was like I was adding, they have several selections. You can go check them out. But one of them is the Usborne Ancient World, and you can read the World Book stuff they provide in the curriculum. And sometimes I would read that aloud. They have Streams of Civilization. You can do Story of the World, although we don't use that, but you can use that. There's all these different spine options, and I found I was doing too many of them. I pulled too many of those in, and we still did literature reading, but I wanted it toward the end. I shifted that. We ended up with just one or two spines that covered the information pretty quickly, and especially when you have the pop quiz audios, you don't really need a whole lot more than that, with a good spine book. And then I tried to focus us mostly on the literature, because that's really what we enjoy, is the literature read-alouds, literature individual reading for the kids, and then one or two activities, which could include a video I found on YouTube or the salt dough map that we did, which I had never done before, Tapestry of Grace, but the kids really enjoyed that. Just different things like that. You can put on a play. They have all sorts of ideas for different levels, and they have ideas that work for all the levels too. So they give you lots of ideas to pick from. I think that's pretty much it as far as how we used Tapestry of Grace. There's a few more things I wanted to mention. One was pacing. There were times when it seemed like we were going too fast through the material, but because we were doing it on our own, we just slowed down. If we wanted to do more of the literature options or more of the spines, or we wanted to add in more activities, we would just do, one of the weeks over 2 weeks, and it was totally fine. Plus, we didn't start right at the beginning of the year, so we weren't on a schedule anyway. And that worked totally fine for me. And, when you get older kids where you're needing to get through certain periods of history in a certain number of years before graduation or whatever, maybe that's more important to be on a schedule. I just wanted us to enjoy and learn history together. And Tapestry of Grace definitely does that. It's definitely a rich buffet of information for lots of topics that you can learn together with your family. I did discover through the process of using Tapestry of Grace and just connecting with other families that used it, that they have a really active handful of Facebook communities, and a lot of the people were recommending joining co-ops. So they have virtual co-ops that you can sign up for, and they have in-person co-ops you can sign up for. They even have classes that you can sign up for online that especially for the upper grades, that are for, the literature discussions. So things like the in-depth literature discussions or the in-depth history discussions is intimidating. Then they have options for you to sign up for courses so that your kids are engaging with other teachers and other students on those things. I have never been, just full disclosure, I have never been a co-op person. I am one of those crazy homeschoolers who doesn't like to follow anybody else's schedule. It wouldn't have worked out for us this year anyway, because of when we started and the pacing we chose. But a lot of homeschoolers I saw really enjoyed that, especially for the upper grades, and felt like it helped them keep on a schedule, and that was important to them. So that's something worth considering if you want to go check out Tapestry of Grace and their online communities. You may find that they have some groups that you can plug into and help you kind of move along. But even if you don't plug into one of the co-ops or whatever, the classes, those were really helpful groups because I could see what other families were doing, and a lot of other, mamas like me who came in saying, this is a lot of, preparation and work, and the other moms would talk us down from the ledge and be like, it's going to be okay. Just start with this, keep it simple. Don't do everything. And so those communities are really helpful, even if you're not going to join a co-op. All right, I think that's it. I know I covered a ton of information. If you have any questions, let me know. I know what I was going to mention. I always, with curriculum, try to present pros and cons because every curriculum has pros and cons. There's no perfect curriculum. And so Tapestry of Grace has a lot of pros and it has some cons or some things that could be improved or whatever. Some things that just don't work for our family is probably a better way of putting it. So let me share some of those with you, some of both. So first of all, Tapestry of Grace is more teacher intensive than I'm used to, and I've already mentioned that. So it's not something I would recommend doing if you're doing a lot of other teacher intensive subjects. But if it's something that is important to you, the topic or the style of teaching or multi-level teaching or whatever, and it's important to you, as it was for me and my family, I think it's worth, struggling a little bit through the initial learning curve to figure out how to do it in a way that best fits your needs. But it is more teacher intensive. It's a lot of information to wade through when you get started. It's easy to overload yourself. I've already mentioned that. It's easy to overload your kids, your homeschool week. You really need to treat it like a buffet where you're just picking and choosing. There are a lot of books. So, it's a literature-based curriculum. So there are a lot of books to choose from. If you have a really good library system where you are, it's probably not a problem and you'll be able to get most of them or at least get some on interlibrary loan. Ours is okay, so I was able to get most of them. For lower and upper grammar, I really feel like you don't need to get, especially for year one, you just really don't need to get the exact same books that they suggest. Because, a book on the pyramids is a book on the pyramids. I don't really think you need to worry about getting the exact book they picked. I think it really only becomes an issue when you get into the dialectic and upper levels, into rhetoric, because their discussion guides and their questions and the evaluations, if you use those, are so centered around the specific book selections. And so in that situation, you may find yourself buying more books than checking them out. So it just kind of depends on if your budget is okay with that. You can, of course, find things. Tapestry of Grace has a website that they provide for buying the books if you want, or you can find them used, whatever works for you. But just keep that in mind. If you're looking at the book list for the lower grammar or upper grammar for year one, and you're like, there's a lot of books that I don't think we have, just know that you can swap out books and you'll be totally fine. They have digital only. So those of you who are hardcore, I need a print curriculum, you may not like that the main curriculum is digital only. Like I said, I kind of was in that boat, but I really preferred the digital only. It turned out to be really helpful and helped me focus on just what I needed instead of being overwhelmed by all the other things. So the World Book text thing, I don't prefer that text. I would prefer if the text that they provided for the teachers or to read aloud, they didn't design the World Book text for you to read aloud to your kids, but I ended up using that mostly because I could read it and on the fly edit it if I needed and add my own comments and then read the author's comments, which I thought were really valuable. As a busy mom, I don't really have time, or I just don't make the time to read ahead. If you do, then it's definitely valuable. If not, and you're trying to use it as a read aloud, you need to be editing it on the fly. Just because of the style it's written in, I don't think I came across anything like inappropriate. It was just, there was so much volume of text, and then, it was boring for the little kids. So what I would do is I'd pick out little pieces that I thought were interesting or gave a good overview, and I would share those pieces. And in the process, I would be giving myself an overview. So you could use it that way. But I would, of course, I would prefer a different spine text that kind of we could use, but they provide other spine text for you to use. So you don't really even have to use that if you don't want to. honestly, by looking through the literature selections and the threads they put at the beginning of each week, you can get enough of a gist, especially for those lower levels of what's going on, that you don't really need to read through that whole teacher text, in my opinion. Okay, so the things that I loved about it were we loved the literature selections. We didn't like all of them, but we loved that there were so many, and we found some really cool ones. We liked the projects. There were some that were more involved that we tried out and we had fun with them, but there were enough that were simple that, this mama could manage them. You can teach all the kids at once. I really like that shared experience. We had a great time with that. There's lots to choose from, and like I said, each year as you come around, you can go deeper and use different selections so it'll feel like a fresh year. Let's see, I really like the pop quiz audios, like I mentioned. We like the writing aids, even though I feel like that's optional. I do also think that Tapestry of Grace is more specifically Protestant and Reformed in perspective. I don't feel, there's lots of different kinds of families and denominations and everything that use tapestries, so I don't feel like there's a problem there if you don't fall in line with that, but our family does, and so it was just kind of comfortable for us. We enjoy that, specifically when you were listening to the pop quiz or when you were reading those little bits that I mentioned woven into the World Book text. That's where you would see some of that come in. And we, as parents, really enjoyed learning along with our kids and learning history along with them. And we liked the big picture that was provided. It really did give you a big picture, and then you dive deep through literature, which is just something that I love, that is a part of our family and our homeschooling. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know. I'm looking forward to sharing with you what we are going to be using in the upcoming year. Our oldest is going into 7th grade. We made a lot of different curriculum decisions in several different subjects. But if you're looking at Tapestry of Grace, I hope that this was helpful for you. Bye-bye.